everyone, and welcome to Call Your Hits, a Storm Riders Airsoft podcast. Thanks for joining us, everyone. Today, I'm here with John, and we're going to be talking about a recent Airsoft game that we played. And in fact, it was our first game of the 2022 Airsoft season. So we were really excited to get out there. The weather here in Newfoundland has been a little bit dicey, a little longer than we normally would like. And because of a really bad winter, the field had to delay opening in order to be able to accommodate players in a safe manner and so on. So that was their business decision, and that sort of pushed us back for a few weeks. But here we are, first week of May, and we're playing our first game of the year. So safe to say, obviously, in Newfoundland, unlike in other places in the world, we have a very long off season. So it was really great to get back out there. Definitely had an itchy trigger finger, so to speak, which is a problem for me, as you can imagine, right?
Yeah, dude.
So I know, John, we were really looking forward to getting out there. Like, what was going through your mind? Like, what was the thing that you were like the most excited about?
Oh man, honestly, just hanging out with all the guys. That was the most exciting thing for me. It was just you get to see everyone, see what new kit they got for like in the off season, try out the new kit that I have. Well, I mean, it's just like some modifications to my rifle and stuff like that. But like, nonetheless, I was still eager to try it out and just, get back out there. Yeah,
man. So I know for me, like, I definitely feel the same way. Like, I was really looking forward to hanging out with the guys, and I had, a couple of extra pieces of kit from over the winter that I wanted to try out. So I had the riser for my optic, which I didn't really have last season, and that was a bit of an issue for me. And I had that dangler that I bought from Mick, the custom made, the Swedish M90 dangler that I had. So a couple little bits and pieces that I really wanted to get at, and of course I did pick up a run cam. Unfortunately, there was some charging issues, and I was a little bit out of sync with that, and it wasn't charged for the game. But anyway, point is, had a bunch of pieces that I was excited to try out and see how they would go. Did you? I can't remember. Did you have a few things that you were looking to try out?
Well, I mean, I guess my airsoft gun was kind of like the biggest thing because you and I did some upgrades at the tail end of the season and last year, and I think if my memory serves me correctly, I played one game with like the upgrades.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah,
maybe we didn't. Maybe we didn't even do that. I think we did like pictures and stuff at Frontline.
Yeah, and that was like you had it, I think, for the training day, but you trained with your AK that day or whatever. But yeah, I think you're right. Like that was October, and we never never used it after. Yeah,
because I thought it was like August or something that we had done it. So I had the notion that I was I had already fielded my I guess you could say new airsoft gun, for lack of a better term, just with all the upgrades. It performed and felt and handled, a little bit differently. My mindset was changed because of it. So, I was eager to try it out. And I think that's kind of like where my biggest issue was.
Oh yeah.
My air, like the Mark 18. I don't know if I like the upgrades we've done to it.
Oh, okay. Like in what way?
Well, I don't know. I just felt clunky behind it. I'm not used to the length. Take that as you will, boys. But yeah, it's a lot longer than I had thought. I printed that 3D printed like handguard, and that was sick. But I also found like it was just kind of I don't know. Something just felt weird about it. I don't know what it was. I mean, there was a little bit of wind, but every shot I was taking was going and zipping off up and to the left. So I don't know. I felt like I should have been hitting shots I should have been, but I wasn't.
Yeah.
And, I just tried to, I was dealing with some injuries and stuff like that coming into the season. That was kind of like preventing me from, moving effectively, stuff like that. So, I mean, it was kind of like my first bad day of airsoft, which is like a shame to start the season off on that. But I mean, it's only up from here.
Yeah, that's very true. But it's
Yeah,
interesting what you're saying about the upgrades. Because I mean, on the one hand, like I can definitely appreciate what you're saying.
yeah, yeah.
Not feeling clunky behind the rifle. But on the flip side, I mean, you don't have a lot of time behind it either. You have a lot of time behind shorter rifles. Like I think about the Mark 18. Even your AK is not that long.
Oh,
Your
dude,
FAL is relatively on the shorter end. I would say, not like
the
super short. Yeah.
the AK is actually like the longest rifle that I own.
Really?
Which is yeah, dude. It's
Oh.
like it's like leaps and bounds longer than the Mark 18, even with the suppressor and the stock fully extended, which is
Hmm.
weird to think about. But it doesn't feel like that in the hand. I don't know what it is, but yeah, this just felt weird. I'm not used to it, and I like obviously I've been fiddling around with it in the off season and stuff like that.
But it's different when you're put in the situation, like
Most
in the off
definitely.
season. Like one of the things I noticed, doing ready ups and doing shoulder transitions and stuff is all fine, and you build that muscle memory. And I think I'm certainly at a point in my career, let's call it, in my time playing airsoft, that
Yep.
even a couple of months off is not erasing the muscle memory that I have, right?
Yep.
Like, and just as an example of that, like Stefan handed me his AK to give it a shot at the
Yep.
game the other day, and I raised the AK up on target, and my
Mhm.
thumb did the selector motion that you do on an
Yeah.
AR,
Yeah.
because I've done it like hundreds of thousands of times by now, I would
Yeah.
say.
Yeah.
And so like I don't think a couple of months is really going to undo that, but at the
No.
same time, like when you're back in the situation where there is not like the stress, but it's like you're trying to do things quickly. You're trying to. There's stakes, right? There, like the stake is if I don't do this quickly enough, someone's gonna is
Definitely.
potentially gonna shoot me. And stuff. So it reframes that problem. So when
Hmm.
you're doing your ready ups and you're learning your manipulation and stuff, it's one thing to do it on the flat range, so to speak, and then as soon
Yeah.
as you hit the airsoft field, it's not that all that goes out the window.
Yep.
But you got other stuff going on too, right?
Yeah, definitely. I felt going back to the last podcast I did, I was really harping on the idea of being loose.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't feel loose this time. I felt like my rifle was just a little too complicated.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know what I mean? Like, does that make any
Yeah.
sense?
Yeah, totally. I mean, I felt the same way just during the games and stuff. Like there were times, and I sent a video to the group chat, and I posted on the Discord as well, just a little clip where
Yeah.
I'm behind the old two-story structure. This was
Yep.
I think it was when we played the assimilation game or something like that. So I'm behind the old
Yep.
two-story structure, and I'm on the outside beneath the stairs,
Hmm.
and I decide that I'm gonna go out from that position, move to the next position, going for hunting for another player or whatever.
Yep.
And I just about step out, and I second guess myself, and I'm like, you know what? You should reload before you go do that. Just do an admin load, no big
Yep.
deal, right?
Hmm.
So I tuck back in real quick, and then I start doing my admin load, and it's just not really working for me. Like I'm
Yep.
trying to get it out of the mag pouch to put it back in, and all this kind of stuff. And as that happens, a player is starting to run towards me, an
Yeah.
enemy
Yeah.
player, right? And what my reaction was to do was to dump whatever I was doing, draw my sidearm, and shoot him,
Yep.
which I have done that very, very seldom in airsoft, right?
Yeah.
Because really, I always feel, and the whole it's like, oh, it's faster to draw your sidearm than reload. That's not true, right? We know that that's not true. So
Yeah.
I probably could have problem solved and finished my reload in the same amount of time that it took me to draw my sidearm. But in my mind at the time, I was like, just forget it. Just dump it, draw your sidearm. And in the actual video, when I watch myself again, I
Yep.
see a lot of that same stuff sort of happening automatically. So you dump the rifle, the pistol comes out, I fire 5 shots. I hit the guy. I fired 5 shots because the first 2 I know I hit the cover in front of me. So I plugged
Yep.
5 shots. He called it. Turns out he never even saw me. I didn't even know if my sidearm was going to work because it was kind of colder or whatever.
Yep.
But I shot
Yep.
him. And then immediately I put the sidearm away, drew my rifle, finished the reload, put the mag in back in the pouch, right? Which is sort of what, big boy rules, right? You should sort of do that.
Yep.
And I had this gnawing feeling that if this had been later on in the season, I probably wouldn't have fumbled around as much. It probably would have been a little cleaner because
Yeah.
I really did. To be honest, like in my training at home, like on my spare time and stuff, how many times have I done an admin reload from a crouch position in my full kit, right?
Yeah.
Next to a piece of cover, like watching what's going on, right? Like in those conditions, like not very many.
Yeah.
right? And so that really reframes everything. And again, it's sort of just the getting back on the saddle, right? And relearning some of those things. Thankfully, our season is quite long, or like we said at the start, the off season is quite long. So
Yeah.
consequently, everyone is learning those lessons at the same time as you are,
Yeah.
which is kind of
I
nice.
felt like everyone besides you and Matt, and actually, I felt like everyone there wasn't rusty. I felt like I was the only rusty one there, which is, I mean, now that I hear your side of the story with that drawing your pistol and stuff like that, you sound like you were a little bit of hesitation. You're like, should I do this? Should I do that? How do I proceed? Like, I've done the drills, I know what to do, but when push comes to shove, how are you going to react to that? And
Yeah.
I mean, you acted accordingly and effectively, I think. But I don't think I could say the same for myself during that entire performance during that day.
Hmm.
Like, I think it was just like I wasn't confident. And that was the first time in, oh God, I have maybe 10 years that I just wasn't confident in like my ability, because I was like, my rifle is not giving me what I want it to give. I got to relearn how to use it again. Like, I got to find my place. And that was kind of like the theme that I had going like mentally throughout the day. It was like, what's my place in this? How do I work it to make myself effective? And I mean, you really need a lot of hours in game to figure out your place. And, sometimes I can be a very impatient person and I want the answer now, but I have to take the shortcomings where they happen and how they happen to really understand how to find my place in it now, as like with more upgraded gear, proficient airsoft manipulation and stuff like that, when it comes to the rifle and stuff like that. And these are all the things that I kind of, now that I'm looking back on it, are valuable lessons to learn. And it kind of changes my perspective on the day, I should say, because I was pretty down on myself.
Yeah, dude. Yeah, you were.
Yeah, I was really down on myself because I wasn't me. It was like someone else playing. I mean,
Yeah.
sure, we can draw that to injuries and stuff like that, and how do we push through that, and how do we use our brain sensibly when there's other variables like our body saying, oh, your shins are really acting up. Ooh, that weight you dropped into your chest is starting to act up now. How do we problem solve that in the airsoft field? And these are lessons I've learned the hard way from the other day.
Well, it's funny that you mentioned as well, like your upgrades with your rifle and like the accuracy issues, because like you had no trouble hitting me in the head from 100 feet away when we were on the same team that game.
Yeah, dude.
Right?
Yeah.
I think it's just funny, and I'm ribbing you about it because we laughed. You felt so bad at the time, and it's like that's kind of stuff happens, right? Like it's not, to me that's not a big deal. Like I certainly wasn't upset about it because, well, firstly it didn't hurt, so at the time, like I'm like, okay, whatever.
Dude, I saw your face, and I was like, oh, he's disappointed.
Well, yeah, I mean it's always disappointing when you get blow on blue, right? But at the same time, like it is what it is, right?
Yeah.
And it's a good, all of that, it comes packaged in lessons, right?
Yep.
So like you can look at that and go, oh my God, I can't believe I shot Phil. I'm so stupid, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
But at the same time, like, let's flip the script here and say, like, why was I out there without you knowing about it? Right?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I told you my train of thought as to, from my perspective, of what led me to engage you when I shouldn't have.
Yeah.
And I mean, sure, there's definitely a lesson to be learned from your side of things as well. I mean, that's the thing about the first game. You don't know what's going to work and what's not going to work. And
yeah.
We found out the hard way that your radio just wasn't transmitting. So
yeah, and I wasn't receiving, right?
Yeah.
And this is part of some of the issues that you have when you have a long off season like that. So I was having issues with the PTT on my radio. So basically, when I plugged my PTT into my radio, I could not hear anything. So I have those Earmore M32s, which are enhanced hearing or whatever, and like amplified hearing or whatever.
Yeah.
So I could hear fine I could hear that portion, but that's self-contained to the unit itself, right? But
Sure.
then it talks to a PTT, which is on my chest rig. And when I connected that to my radio, the microphone would transmit fine, but the hearing would not make its way to my headset. So there's a loose wire in there somewhere, and Chris is going to help me figure that out because he's a wizard with that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But the challenge with the long off season is certain pieces of your gear. It's kind of hard to test if you're just at home, right?
Yep.
So like, I could have plugged in my radio as much as I wanted to. If I don't have someone else trying to talk at me, I'm not going to know that there's a problem until I hit the field.
Definitely.
Right? And that's the case for not just radios, but like if you live somewhere where you can't actually test fire your rifle, for example, before you get to the field, how are you going to know if it's still in working condition, right?
Yep.
So for us, like we have the opportunity where we can do a bit of teching on the off season and all this kind of stuff, but that's not going to be everybody's case. So, and again, like my sidearm is a great example. Like I'm not shooting that in my house, right?
Yeah.
And I don't really do any teching on my sidearm, as I talked about in my gear video. Like it's just stock or whatever. So I have no expectation to think it's not going to work, but it might not. So when I shot that guy into the stairs, my first reaction when we came off the field, I was like, dude, I didn't even know if my sidearm was going to work.
Yeah,
right?
You took a risk. Yeah, you definitely took a risk by doing that.
And that's the case with some of the pieces of kit. Like if you're not able to really keep them in use a lot of times, if they just sit there for a while. I mean, it can happen with your LiPo batteries too. If you store them for like 5 months at the time and you don't store them properly, for example, they might not work the way that they should, and so on and so forth.
I didn't know that. That's good
yeah,
to
like
know.
it can happen. It's very rare. It depends on the quality of the batteries. I think I haven't really had an issue with the ones that we use, like the Nanotech Turnigy ones. Like they're fine, but it certainly can happen, and it can be random too.
Did you have some battery issues on Saturday?
I had some battery issues with my audiovisual equipment, so my cameras and all that stuff, but not with my airsoft gun. Those were best kind.
I got a question. When we were playing that the road game, and you were on the tires on the left side of the road, and you said, "I'm down for a second." What was going on there?
I had to swap my battery for my gun.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
And that was preventative. I didn't know if it was actually down or not. But I felt like the rate of fire, or not the rate of fire, excuse me, the cycle rate of the gearbox was going down a bit.
Okay.
And I was like, I haven't changed my battery all game. This was, let's say, in the later half of the day.
Yep.
I had already shot a fair amount by then, as is my wont. So there was a bit of a lull, and I was like, okay, now's as good a time as I'm going to get in this game, basically.
Most definitely.
Until I get hit, and then I can do it back at the spawn or whatever. But I was like, nah, I'm going to do that right now.
Sure, you could have just told me. I would have shot you for free, like I did, anyways.
Yeah, well, that happened later, but later that game actually. But point is actually, and I was pleased with myself because I think that was a pretty quick battery swap on my end.
It was.
I was pretty happy about that, and I got the chance to use that little admin pouch, or that helicopter pouch that I got from Mick, and it's really small, and I think it's going to take me a little while to get used to where exactly the zipper is compared to the other one. The other one had a much more accessible zipper from like a crouch position. This one is not inaccessible. It's just not where I sort of expected it to be. So again, comes down to how much have I really played around with my kit. Yeah.
I would say maybe try lowering it a little bit, because I'm sure listeners of this podcast know Phil's chest rig by now. And when it's fully loaded, like it sticks out quite a bit. I mean, double stacks.
That's a fair point.
Maybe if you had a little bit lower, you can give yourself a bit more play, a bit more access to it.
Yeah, great idea.
Because
just on Velcro, it's easy enough to just haul it down, right?
Definitely. I just kind of noticed that you were kind of struggling to, like, you're like puffing your chest out at one point, trying to get at it so you could get the give you needed to do it.
Yeah. Totally.
So something you mentioned earlier, and that I think it's really motivated it's really influenced my playing. Talk about admin reloads. We've really you and I feel like we've kind of moved away from the speed reload aspect of things. You know what I feel like more often than not, I'm always doing an administrative reload more often than I'm doing a fast reload. And
definitely.
I think that's just coming down to I mean, that's just comfortability with like our airsoft guns. And we know our magazines, we know our capacity. We can put. I've shot X amount approximately this game. I should probably do a reload now.
Yeah.
But I found that there was one point in the first game that I was bingo on ammo in the magazine I was using. So, and that seldom happens. I'm usually pretty on top of that stuff. And this is kind of influences like my mindset a little bit. I've taped up some pole cord, some 550 cord to each one of my magazines just to help index that mag if my hands are cold or anything. And my hands were cold that day because I don't run gloves.
Mm-hmm.
But being in that kind of sticky situation where I'm needing to get a magazine, and I tried about 2 or 3 times to get it, and I just couldn't index it. So I think now gloves are something that I need to get to, like, to have that better weapon manipulation, index my magazines a bit cleaner, because my hands are stiff and a little bit slower than they are on a hot summer day.
Yeah.
I found this first game very instructive,
Definitely.
and more instructive than like any game from the past like 2 seasons.
Well, it's interesting because I think you really you sort of lose sight of it too when you're not playing.
Yep.
Like you can train and you can practice and you can do all kinds of stuff, and that can be really fun. Like don't get me wrong. Like Chris often said, he likes training just as much as he likes playing,
Yeah.
and that's legit. Like it's not for everyone for sure, but
Mm-hmm.
it's legit. But when you play, like you learn in a different way. Like you really learn from your mistakes, but also
Yep.
from the situations that occur on the field. And I think we definitely had several things that happened that day that were moments that, if you're looking at it from a purely like performance improvement standpoint, you can take a lot from that. Like if all you're looking is to have a little bit of fun, like that's great.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that you had a bit of a rougher day. I had a great time. I had a lot of fun, but there's a lot of moments where I was like, man, like this is a lesson. And
Mm-hmm.
also moments where in my mind, I felt a lot looser than I
Yeah.
had in the past. And again, like applying some of the things that we've been trying to really apply some of the things that we're talking about. Like,
Yeah.
there's a few games where I'm thinking to myself, like, all right, I'm going to shoot and I'm going to move. Like, I don't care. It's happening. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So I would go behind a piece of cover and I would fire a couple of shots. I asked Pat this question in our last podcast and this or that. I said, would you rather would you rather have to fight from only one spot or have to move after every time you take a shot? Right.
Mm-hmm.
And in my mind, I was like, that might be actually a cool way to try and apply some learnings on the field. Like you shoot from somewhere and you gotta go, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so
Yep.
there's a few games when we're playing in the village where I'm like, I'm gonna try and apply this a little bit more. Like I'm gonna go here, I'm gonna shoot, I'm gonna go somewhere else, I'm gonna shoot, and trying to stay loose. And when we did that sort of speed QB game, like later on the Blackhawk field, which is really like a speed QB field, right? It's just
Yeah.
little tiny bunkers, different heights, and then a very, very, very small field.
Yep.
That was again really, really instructive, like a really good opportunity to be like, hey, I've been here too long, it's time to go, right? Or he doesn't expect me to be here, like this is a 50-50 fight, I need to go somewhere else, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely. You know, since we've had that conversation about how my mindset is when I play a game of airsoft, and it's really like it's done the opposite for me. Like I feel like I've just retracted inwards a little bit more, and now I'm starting to doubt myself. I feel the pressure because I've talked about it, and I feel like everyone knows how I play, and which is completely like not true. I mean, well, I mean, it could be not. It could be true. I don't know, but I just feel like there's an added bit of pressure because I've discussed and I've actually vocalized how I think and operate on like the field. And I've never done that before. It's all been instinctual. Now that I've had to think about it, I'm like, now I'm thinking about playing airsoft. You know what I mean?
Right.
Instead of
Yeah,
just
totally.
playing, which is so weird. And I mean, that could just be the anxiety of having a bit of a shitty day.
I think so. I think there's, from my perspective, I really didn't notice a whole lot of difference in your playing on the
Mm-hmm.
field. like your attitudes and stuff were still the same. Like there were lots of times when I'm behind cover, you're like, Phil, gun up. And I was like, yeah, but I'm tired. No, but you know what I mean? Like you're just
Yeah,
shouting
yeah,
at me like gun up, whatever. So that was great, right? And you were still moving around and doing that stuff. But I understand where you're coming from because
yeah,
for several years, I had a rifle that was not able to do things consistently for me.
yeah,
And that is your primary tool,
yeah,
right? You can move around on the field as much as you want. You can be the sneaky guy, you can be the fast guy, whatever. If anytime you pull the trigger, your rifle doesn't do what you expect it to do, that is a
yeah.
problem,
Yeah, it's
right?
like I just don't know where to aim. I don't know where
You
my
don't know where
holes
to
are.
aim. You also don't know what is the result going to be,
Yep.
right? You pull the trigger. Am I actually going to hit this guy, or am I going to just miss him and he's going to hit me instead? So all of that creates this environment where you're certainly now you have a bit of uncertainty that's sort of creeping in,
Yep.
and then you layer on the fact that you're not feeling really good because you're dealing with a couple injuries, right? And then you're adding on the fact that now you're also stressed about, oh, am I thinking about my game too much and all this kind of stuff, and then you're compounding all these different elements that are destabilizing where you were
Yep.
6 months ago or 12 months ago, let's say. And
Definitely.
that's not necessarily a bad thing in the sense that, well, I mean, obviously your injuries are a bad thing. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
That is just,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah. Yeah.
bad. But like the rest of it is not necessarily a bad thing. It's just those are things that now that you know what's going on, you can be like, okay, well, I need to take steps to address that. So with your rifle, you can take steps to go out and zero it and
Yep.
get to a point. And I mean, I'm going to go out and do the same thing with my rifle. So, we'll go together, whatever.
Yeah. Yeah.
But like you zero it in, you get dialed in. So you're like, okay, I know now that if they're 100 feet away and my dot is in this position, 8 out of 10 times I'm going to hit it. Right?
Yep.
Because I say 8 out of 10 because it's airsoft. Like if you're looking for 10 out of 10, you're not going to get it. Right? But like
Yeah, dude.
8 out of 10 times, I'm going to hit it. So we're zeroed. We know. So we're comfortable with that. And then you add on the different layers, like one bite at a time. It's like, all right, it's zeroed. What's my next
Yeah.
problem? Like,
Well, yeah.
oh, well, sometimes if my mags are overfilled, it doesn't feed correctly. Okay, well, now we're not going to overfill my mags, right? Like all that kind of stuff. You know what I mean?
Now you're going to count how many pumps of the speed loader you're going to give it.
Yeah,
Like,
for sure.
that's what Kosh was doing on Saturday. He was counting out loud, saying, "All right, for my P mags or whatever magazines he had, he was like, all right, like 13 seems to be the magic number for me, so I'm just going to count out loud."
Yeah.
And I was like, dog, yeah, that makes sense. That's smart. That's smart. And I'm at the point now where like my magazines, like the springs are starting to slow down. Like the magazines are old. They've probably been around since dinosaurs roamed the earth, honestly.
Yeah.
So
maybe since your dad played even that long.
whoo, dude, we're talking birth of the universe.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I'm thinking maybe now is the time to start taking, like, I think I went into the season, well, I went into the first game with all these upgrades. And, like, now I'm in the process of simplifying those upgrades. And I think that's, like, the job of the first game is to teach you how to simplify your kit to get you more comfortable with what you have in terms of like your upgrades, and there's the excitement that you have, like I'm going to hit the field and I have a longer barrel now. I have a new hop-up unit. These are all sweet, and I'm super confident in my abilities because I know I have the upgrades. But it's maybe the upgrades are a bit of a downgrade until you get those properly zeroed and dialed in and stuff like that. And it's just simplifying your kit. Like I know now it's like I feel like since I added the sling, now I have all these different upgrades. There's more things for me to think about, trying to manipulate, all while trying to process what it is I'm dealing with on the field at the same time. So right now it's the great pullback for me in terms of my kit and how I organize it and how I kind of the process of elimination of how to achieve the best, the most desirable outcome, which is obviously not getting hit and winning the game.
Mm-hmm.
And looking back on it now, I'm happy that I failed, and personally, in terms of like, I might not, in your eyes, I might not have failed, but for me, I was a bit of a failure to myself, and I got to say, love it or hate it, Episode 8 of Star Wars, Yoda's line, "The greatest teacher failure is," and
yep,
that's
totally,
something
100%.
that's like my mantra for life. Every failure is a learning opportunity, and you have to accept that failure in order to grow and be better. And now, as we're having this conversation, I'm vocalizing my kind of like my anxieties and shortcomings and my failures. I'm able to like process those things a little bit differently, which is sick.
Well, yeah, and I think you hit the nail on the head. Like, if everything had gone great, what
Yeah,
exactly would you change next game? Well, probably not a lot, right? And so
yeah,
then it's going to be the same stuff over and over. Like, the whole
yeah,
reason that for us that we do this is we're constantly trying to get better and push ourselves and stuff. And I
exactly.
remember a few years ago you were tired with the Mark 18 because you're like, well, I feel like I'm not progressing here because
Hmm.
I just know it, right?
Yeah,
And so now you're looking at other stuff. You're looking at the FAL, you're looking at the AK as different ways to challenge yourself. Well, now you're
yeah,
back on the M4 platform,
yeah,
and it provides a new set of challenges for you to overcome, right? And
definitely.
they're all valuable. They're all valuable
Hmm.
lessons, and I think also just even having sort of the wherewithal to stick to it and go, okay, well, I am going to learn. I am going to get better. I am going to improve in this spaces rather than just saying, okay, well, I'm going to just revert back to what I know. Or like in your case, it would be nothing for you to just be like, yeah, you know what? Forget it. I'm just going to wear a World War II kit all year. Right. And not focus on
Yeah,
this problem, which you could
yeah,
totally do and be totally cool.
definitely.
And
Yep.
as an airsofter, you're doing it for fun. So who cares?
Yeah,
But on the flip side, you have this opportunity to come up with a solution, right? And
definitely.
that's really where your attitude is going to be really important. You know,
Definitely.
we had some challenges like just in terms of gear. We had some challenges in terms of game. Not everything went the way that we wanted to. That
Yep.
game that you shot, you team killed me or whatever.
Yep.
We ended up losing that game. I'm
Hmm.
not necessarily sure we would have won even if that hadn't happened, right?
Yeah.
Because of the way the game was going, right?
Yeah. That was one of those weird games. That was one of those weird games. I find the road in terms of like like in term. I think for the first half of that game, we were completely dominating. We had everything covered. We just got a little antsy.
Definitely.
We just got a
Yep.
little antsy. I know Kosh on the left wanted to move up a little bit. Simon, the new player, wanted to push up to the berm. We kind of overextended ourselves. You and I held our pause, and we assessed the situation. We had our angles, and we were able to give accurate call-outs to each other. I think
Mm.
maybe looking back on it, I think I know where the shortcomings team-wise that we kind of struggled with, and because of those struggles and those overextensions, we lost the advantage and ultimately lost the game.
I'll tell you, there was a few times during that game and a couple of other games where maybe it's because I have the helmet scrim on my helmet now, but I
Yeah,
felt invisible.
yeah,
Like,
man.
totally invisible. Like, I remember playing that game. I was up front, like that tire game, that excuse me, that road game. I was up on the tires, like in front of you or whatever.
Yep.
And you called out, "Hey Phil, like Matt's on the crow's nest on the left," and I turned, and he's probably I don't know like what the distance is there. I'm gonna say like 60 feet,
Yeah,
70 feet, something like that.
I was gonna say
And
something
he is
similar.
stood up behind a piece of cover, completely open to me,
Hmm.
right? Conversely, I am just completely open to him, but he
Yep.
does not see me for whatever reason. And so I fired like 3 or 4 shots. I hit him, hand went up, great, no problem. Later on, that very same game, this is just before you shot me actually. So Kosh is pushed up on the, and I don't keep harping on it to make you feel bad, but just to
No,
give
I
you
know.
a type frame of reference.
Yep. Yep.
Kosh is pushed up on the left, back on the crow's nest again, and I'm
Hmm.
on the boardwalk, sort of not far behind him on his right.
Yep.
And I'm again behind a piece of cover, but I'm exposed, right? Because I think he's being shot at from his like center left or whatever. He
Sure.
gets shot. Matt comes around the corner, and he is stood up directly facing me and does not see me. And I'm like, man, that's weird. I mean, I shot him, and then I moved up, and then you shot me, whatever. But then
Yep.
the same thing when we played the assimilation game when I was under the stairs and Jason ran right at me and did not
Yep.
see me. Like there's several times that day, man, where I just felt like, am I John Cena right now? Can people not see me? Because I'm standing right here or I'm crouching right here and you're looking right at me,
Yep.
but nothing's happening. Like it was a very, and I mean, maybe it is the helmet scream, I don't know. But it was really like a very strange sort of experience.
Well, if you look at it, I mean, you are wearing you're a lot more concealed than you were last year. Like you have a face covering now. You
Oh,
have
that's true.
You have
Yeah.
scrim. the only bit of like whiteness that's coming, like kind of shining through, is just your nose.
Yeah.
And I mean, I mean, that in itself could be seen as a form of camouflage. If everything is dark and that's the only light bit, then that's just breaking out the outline of, a face or something like that. I mean, alternatively, you can argue the opposite, of course, but you were just completely concealed, and this is just a testament to camouflage and why armies adopt it as like they want to make it as effective as possible because it will give their soldiers the fighting chance they need and the leg up in certain circumstances. And you
Totally.
just perfectly demonstrated why that is actually the case.
But dude, you just reminded me, my Delta Mic Face Pro.
Yep.
That was my first time in airsoft ever wearing dedicated face protection.
Yep.
And I forgot that I even had it on. So that should tell you guys, if you're listening to this, you're like, I wonder if Delta Mic is comfortable. For me, with a Caucasian build for my face, totally comfortable. I had no issues whatsoever. Sometimes it was a little mumbly when I was trying to talk.
Yep.
But in terms of comfort, clearly, I didn't even know it was there the whole day.
Yeah.
Right? So that was pretty great.
When I was wearing my balaclava doing the admin results, like kind of spoof, I always found it was coming down over the face, like coming down over it was on my upper lip, having basically the same layout as yours, and just kept getting garble up in my mouth and just kind of sliding on down. So annoying. Annoying. And I don't know if maybe next time I'm just not going to wear it, but I mean, it certainly offered some added warmth, which was nice.
Another thing you could potentially do with the Delta mic, it has the top of it is actually there's a drawstring, like a cord.
Oh, okay. Yep.
So basically, when you have it in position, what I did is I put it obviously over my mouth and then over my ears, and then basically at the top like rear of my head, and then I just cinched it down with that cord, and it has one of those slide thingies, slide locks or whatever, and just slid in place, and then it did not move the entire game. So you could do the same thing with a sewing machine, I guess, and just run a cord through the top, or one of the ends of the tube, basically.
Yep. Definitely. Like as time goes on, like I've kind of towards the latter half of last season, I kind of stopped wearing a helmet and I started wearing ball caps. And I don't know if that's necessarily what I want to do. Maybe I'm looking at it and I'm like, maybe helmets are the way to go. Maybe I should get like a modern cut of helmet. Maybe eventually get some cans like what you have, just to try it out and see see how it works and see how it feels. Because I know a lot of people vouch for helmets. I mean, I did for so long, but I haven't found a very comfortable one. A lot of my helmets obviously are historical, but they're not form fitting to like how your helmet sits on your head or Kosh's or anyone else's, because everything else is kind of loose, kind of either too big or too small. There's that's the thing with like old surplus military is it's either you're not going to get it just right. You're just going to get it in one of the extremes, either too big or too small. But it's something I'm playing around with now. Like maybe I'll look at getting like a Mitch 2000 or something like that, some older cut that has the ability to be modified in some comfortability, like kind of sense. But
yeah, and like I think one of the things that's important for me and my helmet is that it's a replica. We talked about it before. It's like a replica fast helmet, right?
Yep.
And it has a knob on the back that can tighten the helmet band very easily around your head. And like the thing about it is like if you're not accustomed to wearing helmets that fit like that, sometimes you can give you a headache or whatever, right? If you're just not used to it. And that's the kind of thing that you want to sort of test out, before you commit to it, right?
Yeah.
So like you could wear my helmet, for example, for a game or something like that, and then you might be like, oh my god, like this is like way too tight on my head, and I don't like it. So you go a different route, but it's not something you want to discover after like half of your days elapsed, and you're like, oh my god, I need an Advil or something because my head hurts, right?
I mean, ultimately they're going to be lighter than steel.
Well, yeah.
I mean, my neck has gotten pretty strong over the years of wearing M1 helmets, and British Mark IIs and Mark II, like airborne helmets and stuff like that. And so I got quite the strong neck, but it's something I'm playing around with. Like, I know I'm talking about trying to simplify my kit, and can't get much simpler than a baseball hat and your iPro. But like, airsoft is about having fun and stuff, and it's also a fashion show, and it's all about looking cool. So I think helmets look so sick, but I don't have a good one that fits me really. So it's something I'm playing around with, and I'm looking forward to like maybe giving your helmet a run for a game, and then probably getting a video out of that from my perspective and me being a juice artist for like, I don't know, 15 minutes or whatever. Back to the mask for a sec. I got a quick question. Did you find any, like, did you have any fogging issues?
I didn't have any fogging issues whatsoever. Like the way that that balaclava is made, I think they call it a snood. It's essentially the same thing.
Okay.
The fabric itself is like, I've seen Cal have that, like it's like a sniper mesh fabric or something. He's called it, like in the forces. It has lots of holes in it.
Yeah.
And then it's got the grill in the front, but again, it's a mesh grill, so
Okay.
it breathes really well. I didn't have any issues like with fogging whatsoever. And I mean, as well, like I really very rarely have fogging issues anyway with my iPro.
Yeah.
So yeah, it really wasn't an issue.
Yeah. Like, I mean, upgrading, like, I mean, my iPro just needs to be upgraded as well.
Mhm.
Like the ESS stuff, that like the big ones, that like having glasses is such a detriment when it comes to airsoft, because like you're severely limited in what you can and cannot wear, and it's it's something that I really want to work on. I think maybe this season more than any other season is trying to get my eyes straightened away.
Yeah.
And I don't know how I'm going to do that. Like, contacts, just for whatever reason, just don't gel with me. I just can't get them in, which is kind of frustrating. But
Yeah, I mean, I unfortunately can't provide any
I
assistance
know,
in
I
that
know.
realm.
Maybe if there's some listeners here that have glasses like that are fellow four eyes like myself, that have some recommendations, that would be greatly appreciated.
I know Pat got LASIK. That's how he fixed that problem, but it's not something that's
Yeah,
easy for everybody. So
yeah, I don't have however much money that is to
yeah,
do.
no question.
Plus,
Especially if you keep dropping it on World War II Denison smocks. So we'll save that conversation for another day. I
yeah,
think one of the things at the end of the day for me, like coming back to this first game, that really ultimately sticks out is, despite the fact that it's been, like 5 or 6 months or whatever, we still ended up doing a lot of the same stuff.
yeah,
And my brain just would work the same way that it always does, really getting accustomed, really going back to what it's accustomed to. Like,
hmm
how are we going to play the village? Same way we always play the village, right? How are we going to play
Well,
the
I
road,
wouldn't say
right?
I wouldn't necessarily say we play the village in the same way, because, as you alluded to in the beginning of the
Oh, that's true.
podcast,
Yeah.
some of our field was severely impacted by the winter we had. So, in one particular case, one of the buildings next to one of the usual spawns in the village has been, which is a building with a roof, has been moved, what, like 10 feet.
Yeah.
So it's completely off its base, off its foundation. So usually, well, yeah, we would have the ability to go right off the right hand side of the spawn and just move down the village, and that's just not there anymore.
Yeah.
Because that building is now obstructing it, and we can't go in the ditch, and there's additional wood and nails and stuff like that are a byproduct of that move,
Yeah.
unintentional
It's
move.
dicey. It's
So
dicey.
like, we adopted to that challenge accordingly, I think. So in terms of like our individual like tactics and stuff, I don't like I think they're just as sharp, if not sharper, now than they have been over the course of, I don't know, the 10 years or whatever we've been playing. Which is great, great, great. And I'm so happy we have that ability to be able to like adaptively think and problem solve and come up with new solutions and kind of just be more dynamic, and like as a result of those things.
Mm-hmm. I think one of the things I'm looking forward to now, just looking at sort of the first game, is trying to come up with a couple of different game modes, a couple of different things we can do a bit differently this year,
Sure.
um, to not just keep it from getting stale, but also just to utilize the field in different ways, in ways that
Yeah.
we haven't done that before, especially given like some of the areas that are so impassable now as a consequence of like the winter, right?
Yep.
People are like, oh, well, you can't play on those fields because they're like, trees are falling over and all this kind of stuff.
Yep.
And my argument would be like, well, that's true. You can't play the way that you used to, but that just means the field has changed shape. So
Yep.
how can we utilize that and play different games, right? We don't
Yep.
know what the balance is going to look like because the cover hasn't been placed there on purpose like it is in a lot of places.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean we can't do that. I mean, none of the cover was placed on purpose at Redcliffe, and we still worked around it. So I think
Yeah, exactly.
that's something that I'm excited about is what are we going to be able to do? I think about like that Big Fort field in particular. Like the
Hmm.
trees are just like all over the place. Like it's very, very hard to move around on that field.
Yep.
That's not necessarily a bad thing, right? That
No,
provides
definitely.
you a lane that makes it very hard for people to traverse. And so if you're playing a game that's like top or bottom, for example, and that's in the way, well, that's going to shape the way that game is played. So I'm looking forward to, well, obviously they're going to do some cleanup, but
Yeah.
I suspect they're probably not going to take down all the trees that fell over.
No.
So maybe there'll be a really good opportunity for us to utilize those fields in a way that's a bit more fun. Maybe even for some scenarios. Yeah.
Definitely. I mean, it just makes the field ultimately more dynamic as a result of it because our thought process is completely changed as a result of the changes that have unintentionally been made. Yeah, man. A lot of lessons learned from that very first game.
Totally, and I feel like we could talk about it for hours and hours. I don't think we need to go any further than that for this
Yeah.
evening. But like, I do think that it's important. I mean, if you guys are listening to this podcast and you're saying like, what's the big deal, blah blah blah. Like, I would say the key message here is anytime you play a game, especially if it's been a while since you played, or you're trying out new stuff, like you really got to take the opportunity to learn from the situations that you're presented with.
Yeah.
And in some cases it might feel like a negative at the end of the day, and it certainly can be. Like you can be down on yourself. Like at the end of the day, John said to me, he's like, I did not have a good day or whatever. But just because you didn't have a good day doesn't mean there's no value in that day. And then
Yeah.
suddenly when you've taken a couple of steps back and you've gotten far enough away from it, you can look at it a bit more objectively and be like, okay, well, what does my path forward look like now, right?
Yeah. I mean, I guess if you're having a bad day on the field, just take note of what's going wrong. And just then, if you're anything like me, talking it out with someone or just talking to yourself and try to problem solve those things or just vocalize them in any form, you'll be able to see things a little bit differently. At least I do. And my perspective has completely changed on the game. Like, I had all these shortcomings and all these hiccups that I've never had before in a game of airsoft, and it's kind of informing me of the direction that I need to go this season.
Mm-hmm.
And that, I mean, mine is more on a grand scale because this is the very, very first game, and this is the setup that I currently have, and I intend to use throughout the season. And now it's just a matter of maximizing that effectiveness and not being so like bummed out. Because I know, Phil, you went through something similar with when your rifle wasn't performing well, similar to what I'm going through.
Yeah,
And
man, totally.
having that positive mindset and taking note of what's going wrong and how can I fix that and mitigate these issues benefits you in the long run, and makes you ultimately a better player, a more true to yourself type player.
Absolutely. Couldn't have said it better. Well, guys, thank you so much for listening. I hope you found this episode educational and entertaining. As always, if you want to keep the conversation going and you want to share your experiences on your first day back after a break or the off season, join us on the Discord. The Discord link is in the description before. But until that time, that's all we got for you. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll talk to you next time.